Lake County, Florida is beautiful. Local farms and tree groves are scattered throughout rolling hills. Cobblestone streets are lined with these quaint boutiques and restaurants, giving the kind of charm that you can only find in small towns. Spanish moss hangs from the branches of live oak trees, and more than 1,000 lakes provide a serene and picturesque landscape at every turn. As summer was coming to an end, I spent 5 eventful days inside the Lake County Courthouse. The tranquil beauty of the surrounding land seemed to stand in stark contrast to the intense and often troubling proceedings going on inside. 2 very different versions of events were told during those 5 days of trial. And no matter which parts you believe, one thing is clear. The relationship between Laurie and Michael Shaver was toxic. And that toxic relationship ended up costing him his life. My name is Brandi Churchwell, creator and host of 13th Juror podcast. This is part 2 of the case against Laurie Shaver. The trial, the verdict, and the stories that didn't get told. On Monday, September 9th, dozens of potential jurors filed into the Lake County Courthouse as the trial of Laurie Shaver was finally set to begin. A little after 3 p.m., the judge called the names of 5 women and 3 men, dismissing the rest, and swore them in as jurors. The final jury would only consist of 6. 2 of the chosen jurors were alternates, and after a short recess, opening statements began. Rich Buxman, the chief of homicide prosecution in the 5th Judicial Circuit, told the jury that this case was about common sense. He methodically walks the jury through the timeline of what happened, the back and forth between Michael and Laurie, Michael moving back in after a separation, the last time he's seen alive, not showing up for work, and his friends and family receiving only text and Facebook messages from him after that point, all telling them to leave him alone. He tells the jury that after Mike disappeared, Laurie began to sell his things. She lied about where he went, accepted a loan in his name, and then poured concrete over his body to make a fire pit in their backyard. He walks through the extensive list of evidence that points to Laurie Shaver being responsible and closes with his final thought.
There can only be one common sense conclusion, and that is the defendant is guilty beyond any reasonable doubt. Thank you so much for your time.
Defense attorney Jeffrey Wiggs is up next, and he paints an entirely different picture.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard the state's opener. We've heard one repeated statement, common sense. Just use your common sense. It's all about common sense. Okay. Now, the judge is going to give you instructions, and he's going to give you boundaries under the law. And it's not going to say just find the defendant guilty by common sense. That's the state standard. No. Okay. The facts are far different from what the state is pronounced here today. And let me tell you, really, how this case originated. What was done, and what was not done by the state in this case.
Wiggs goes on to tell the jury that Michael Shaver was very possessive, combative, and destructive. Wiggs accused him of imposing fear on his family repeatedly, but claims that Laurie never resorted to violence at any time. He claims that the real story of what happened is the story that he and Laurie will tell, but says that the prosecution turned them away and didn't want to hear it because they had made up their minds. The story he then tells is something different than anything we've heard before up to this point.
Now, what happened was Mr. Townsend was having this affair with Laurie, and Mr. Shaver was not supposed to be at the residence. Morning arrives. Mr. Shaver arrives on the scene. Begins battering Laurie Shaver. He wants her back. She was chatted to him, just like a car or a piece of property. And she informs him, we're not going back. And she starts giving the dates being held. minor child heard this. Isabelle Shaver. State didn't know about Isabelle. We advised the state about Isabelle, only to be turned away. Only to be turned away from their office because they had formulated a plan. They had formulated a design. This is how it happened, but we don't want to hear another story. So we were sitting on it.
Wiggs tells the jury that Michael began battering Laurie and that her daughter Isabelle heard it and stepped in. Now, when he tells them that they told the prosecutors about Isabelle but were turned away because the state didn't want to hear it, that is patently false, but it's an accusation that Wiggs will continue to repeat throughout the trial. The state did talk to Isabelle, but had to do it under subpoena to protect her rights. Her attorney was also told many times that Isabelle could come talk to them at any time that she was ready, and when she didn't, that's when they issued the subpoena and did a deposition with her. Wiggs goes on to tell the jury that the state's case is a case of conjecture, and the digital evidence that they have doesn't prove that Laurie killed Mike. He tells them that the state isn't seeking justice, they're seeking a verdict, and he says that the two are opposite goals. The state calls witness after witness as they lay out their case against Laurie. We hear from the Merritts, who were the last to see Michael alive at the tractor show on November 7th. They call co-workers of Mike's who testified about what a great worker Mike was, and his boss showed that he had no history of any issues at work, including no problems with not showing up. The state calls some of Mike's family members, who all verify that they never saw him or physically talked to him after November when he went missing. Desiree Ruggles, Michael's niece, testified about the Facebook messages that she received from Mike's Facebook, claiming to not know who she was. Prosecutors have pointed out that Michael would have known her new married name, but Laurie would not. Michael's longtime best friend, Scott Amatuccio, took the stand and told the jury about middle school when Mike asked Laurie out while he was in Scott's bedroom, and he asked Scott to play Boys to Men in the background. Later in life, Scott began dating a woman named Katina, who became close friends with Laurie. Scott was unable to get in touch with Michael for a while, but toward the end of 2017 or early 2018, he said that Katina called him with some concerning news, and that's what led him to file the missing persons report. The jury is walked through the process of Lake County Sheriff's Department responding to the house for the wellness check, the concern with the fire pit that had been freshly poured, and with Laurie's unwillingness to cooperate after the fire pit was brought up. They walk through the excavation process, identifying the skeletal remains as Mike's, and the cause of death being a bullet to the back of the head, though not as an angle as if it was coming from a small child. There was one rib that showed that it had been broken after death, often caused when moving a body. Robert Seha testifies that he bought a pink .38 caliber handgun from Laurie in 2018, though Laurie later says on the stand that that gun is not the one that was used to shoot Mike. It was a different pink .38 caliber handgun that she said she never saw again after Jeremy took it and did something with it. The owner of JB Guns testifies about the firearms that he purchased from Laurie in December, the month after Mike's disappearance. And on the third day of trial, Laurie's current husband, Travis, takes the stand. He tells the jury that he met Laurie in January of 2016 at a get-together that his brother and his now wife, Rebecca, were having. Travis was seeing someone else at the time, and Laurie had apparently made it clear to him that she was in a relationship. But at the time that they met, there was no mention of her being married or of her boyfriend being married, but I digress. The two started dating in May of 2016, and she told Travis that she was divorced and her ex-husband wanted nothing to do with the family, and she had no idea where he was. Travis said that he moved in with Laurie only about a month or two after they began to date. His twin brother's girlfriend, Rebecca, who is now his wife, was also living at Laurie's at the time. Travis tells prosecutors that he did rent the concrete mixer and poured the slab with Laurie over the fireplace, but claims that it was just him and Laurie that did it. His brother Austin didn't help. When Austin takes the stand, he contradicts this. He said that Travis didn't realize what a big job it would be, so he called him to help out. Austin helped his brother, though he had no idea what was underneath that pit. Travis is asked about his wedding to Laurie in December of 2016. He claims that it was just a commitment ceremony, but in a video that I obtained from a family member, it was clearly a wedding ceremony. She wore a wedding gown and had wedding cake and walked down the aisle that happened to begin around the area where a fire pit now hid the body of Mike Shaver. The boy that she had known since kindergarten, who asked her to be his girlfriend while in his best friend's bedroom with Boyz II Men playing in the background, who later became her husband and the father of her 2 children. I can't help but wonder if she started feeling guilty about this. I met with Rebecca Urbanowski, who went from Laurie's personal trainer to her friend to her roommate, and is now Laurie's sister-in-law. Rebecca told me some details about the wedding ceremony that had not been previously released.
They were talking about getting married, but it didn't seem like they were sure. She was saying that it was Travis's idea. Travis seemed uneasy. Like, she had gone out and like they picked out the rings, but she purchased them. Like, so it kind of seemed like she was spearheading that one. But she had told us that the reason that he was wanting to get married is because they were already living together, and he felt like if they were, living out of wedlock, that wasn't a good look, and that's not what he wanted to do. And along the lines, we found out like Travis, he even said like he didn't want to get married at that time anyways. But
the day of the wedding, Rebecca, her future husband Austin, and Austin and Travis's mother Kendall were all planning on going to sign a lease so that they could move into a new place together on the next day. So Rebecca would be moving out of Laurie's house. They went and signed the lease and then went to Laurie's to get ready for the wedding.
Signed her lease, came back, and she had already been ready, or was getting ready. She had her gown on. She had went and purchased like this. It was like $200 wedding gown from, I don't know if she got it from a wedding shop. I want to say she got it from like a secondhand store. Like it just wasn't planned out. She had just went and got one. It was all just kind of thrown together. So she was there. There was the cake there. There's a few of our friends or her friends and our family. So I go into the back bedroom and she's there in the big closet. She had already had like a glass of wine, and she was kind of like almost like double handing one. There was like one in each hand almost. I went in there and I was like kind of wanting to like help her get ready. I was excited for her and stuff. And she had already gotten ready and was doing her thing. And, we gave each other a hug, and we're, sitting there crying and whatever. And so we get through the wedding. We do the wedding reception. They do like this blending of the families type ceremony where they all have like this different color sand. And at the end of the ceremony, they like pour them all into like this one vase, I think it was.
Travis and Austin's grandfather walked Laurie down the aisle, and Rebecca says that later on in the evening apparently became a point of contention. They were having a dinner reception on the back porch, and it was mostly just Travis's family. Laurie told Rebecca that her parents couldn't afford to make it down, so there was actually nobody there from Laurie's family, although she did have a couple friends. While at the reception, Rebecca said that there was noticeable tension.
I'm watching Travis's face, and I can see he's just kind of irritated about something. And we get kind of through with the reception. Everything's good. She's doing her typical Laurie thing. She's being like, the hostess. Like, she's just making sure everybody's okay. Everyone's got a drink, everyone's got food, just ensuring that everybody's taken care of. Later on that evening, we notice like tensions are starting to grow. He's getting a little bit more irritated, and then she's getting upset because he's irritated. And so as the evening's going on, like, we're trying to figure out why they are just having these small spats. Finally, I asked her, I'm like, what's going on? And she had told me that he was upset with her because she had their grandfather walk her down the aisle.
Rebecca thought that was really weird because Austin and Travis had a great relationship with their grandfather. Their grandfather was basically like a father, so Laurie felt that that's who was closest to Travis when thinking about a male figure to walk her down the aisle. Rebecca said that she didn't really understand why this would be an issue, so she talked to Travis about it.
when we kind of talked to Travis about why he was just upset because she was paying more attention to everybody, as the guest than she was with him. Like, she wasn't really sitting with him at their reception. As the night went on, I guess the tempers and the tension started to increase for sure, because neither one of them were like communicating why the other one was upset.
Laurie and Travis are having some spats throughout the evening. Laurie had changed her clothes, took off her wedding dress, and put on jeans and boots. And around 10 p.m., Travis, his brother Austin, and their cousins are outside setting off some fireworks that they had purchased specifically for the wedding reception. Now, this apparently sets Laurie off, and she disappeared into the bedroom. Rebecca and Travis's mom, Kendall, went in to talk to her to figure out what was going on.
She proceeds to tell us that she's just feeling like she's just not adequate enough for Travis. And then, of course, she starts going on about Mike and how that relationship was, and the abuse and things like that. And I'm like, what does that have to do with what's going on right now? Like, as terrible as that might have been for you, what does that have to do with this? And so we go and we talk with Travis, and we're trying to relay, and we're basically playing messenger as to what's wrong with this girl.
At this point, the only people left at the house are Rebecca and Austin, Laurie and Travis, the kids, and Kendall. Rebecca said that Travis then goes and tries to speak to Laurie.
He goes in and he talks with her, and they have this complete blowout about whatever, about setting off these fireworks. There's $700 worth of fireworks, and you set them off without me, out there with your cousins, and this was something we were supposed to do together, and just going on and on and on. And it got so bad that after a while, he comes out, he takes his ring off, he slams it on the kitchen table, and he says, "I'm done." He goes, I'm getting an annulment.
Rebecca said that they were shocked. They were trying to figure out how it escalated to this point, all because they weren't communicating. They decide to try to help the situation out, so Austin goes to talk to Travis to calm him down, and Rebecca and Kendall try to go talk to Laurie. Rebecca said that Laurie was crying and going on, and she and Kendall then went outside to talk to Travis to try to piece together what's going on. After about 15 minutes, Rebecca said that she walked back inside to talk to Laurie, but all of a sudden, it was like she completely disappeared.
I go back inside to talk with her, see if she's okay, and I can't find her. And I'm like, well, where the heck is she? She's not in her room. I checked the small closet that's right in her bedroom. I checked the bigger closet. I checked the bathroom. I checked my room. I checked the kids' room. I checked the other bathroom. I go outside. I'm like, I can't find her. And then Kendall's like, well, let me kind of drive the opposite way further down the road. Let's see if she just walked down the road. I'm like, cool. I'll drive back up towards the main road, see if she walked that way. Because it's pitch dark. You're not going to see her. You're not going to see anybody. There's no street lights out there.
Travis and Austin walked around the pasture looking for Laurie, while Kendall and Rebecca drove down the road. When she was still nowhere to be found, Rebecca goes back inside the house to see if maybe she missed her somewhere.
So I go in her closet, and then it dawned on me that she has that other small closet inside of the big closet. So I happened to open that door, and there she was lying down, and almost like she was sleeping. And I'm like, you couldn't have fallen asleep that fast. But she just sat there, laying there, like she was fast asleep. And I'm like, Laurie, what the heck is wrong with you? Why are you in this closet? And she gets up and she just storms by me, doesn't say anything to me. And she gets right up in Travis's face, yelling at him, and was like, I don't understand why Becca is the one that had to find me. You know that back when I was with Mike, that he would put me in the closet to punish me and only basically let her eat so often. He would bring her food and water here and there when he felt good and ready. So she said, you know that that's what I do when I feel like I've done something bad, that I punish myself by putting myself in that closet. And I'm like, first of all, I've lived with you since May. I have never once seen you do this. Not one time. In all the fights that you've gotten into, I've never seen you guys do this. And so they're back and forth in each other's, kind of in each other's face. And then he somehow managed to calm himself down, because he's like, what is wrong with you? So he's at this point where he's got his hands in his pockets, and he's just kind of looking at me and Austin, what am I going to do? What's happening? And so she's yelling at him. She's got her finger in his face. And I finally kind of stepped towards like in the middle of them because they're right where my bedroom is. And Austin's on the up, right directly across from me. And I'm like, Laurie, you need to back up. I'm like, you're getting dangerously close to him. I said, you're literally behaving the same way that you said Mike behaves. She goes, I don't care. And she almost kind of like waves me off and almost swats at me. So at that point, she starts screaming at us to get out of the house. She goes, I want all of you to leave. I don't want any of you here. You guys all need to get out. And I'm like, what is your problem? Like, this makes no sense. Like, why are you treating us like this? I'm like, you guys just got married like 6 hours ago. And so apparently we weren't moving fast enough. She goes, you all need to get out of my house right now. And so I looked at Austin. I said, you know what? Let's go stay at your house for tonight until we move in tomorrow. I turn around and I tell him, I'm like, let me go ahead and just grab my laptop. And as I'm doing this, she had already went and got Aiden and Isabelle out of their rooms. And as she's doing that, she storms by my room as I'm turning around to get my laptop. She slams the Christmas tree down and she goes, I'm grabbing the gun. And so the boys are like on the opposite side of my room, on the outside where the kitchen is. And I turn around, I'm like, what did she just say? I'm like, I couldn't have heard what I just heard. And that's when I saw both the boys, eyes just bugged out. And Austin's like, she just said she's going to grab a gun.
Rebecca said they were all shocked. Nobody knew that Laurie had a gun. She isn't supposed to have one with Travis being there since he's a 3-time convicted felon, and Laurie had told Rebecca that she sold all of the weapons. Laurie then runs into her room with the kids and locks the door. Austin begins trying to kick the door down. We'll be right back. In the world of criminal justice, every detail counts, and the same goes for your sleep. With GhostBed, you don't need to settle for anything less than perfection. GhostBed has been crafting high-quality mattresses and sleep products for over 20 years, and they're all about getting the details right. From premium materials to patented cooling technology, GhostBed mattresses are designed to help you sleep better, longer, and cooler. You can also rest easy with their 101-night sleep trial. They know that shopping for a mattress can be overwhelming, and they're here to help you find your perfect match. Whether you're a side sleeper that loves a plush feel or a back sleeper that needs firmer support to align your spine, GhostBed has the mattress for you. You can take their online mattress quiz to get your personalized recommendation, or chat with one of their friendly sleep experts to walk you through the decision process. Plus, GhostBed's fast and free shipping means that you could be sleeping better in just a few days. 13th Juror listeners can get 50% off site-wide with the promo code Brandi. So, what are you waiting for? Don't let poor sleep be the case that you can't crack. Visit ghostbed.com/Brandi and use code Brandi, BRANDI, at checkout for 50% off your entire order. Sweet dreams.
And then Travis just took this running leap and he put his whole body in the door and the door came down like off the hinges. And I see both the kids on the left side of the bed and they just look so scared. It just breaks my heart to just think about that. But so I'm looking at them and I'm like, guys, just run to me right now.
Rebecca grabs both kids and runs out the door, hiding between the 2 sheds out back.
The first thing Aiden says is, what gun? What does mommy say she has a gun? And Isabelle was sitting there and she goes, no, mommy wouldn't do that. It's okay. We're fine.
Rebecca thought the whole thing was so bizarre, and she said that it happened so fast there wasn't even time to be scared. But it made no sense how it got to that point. After a few minutes, she tells the kids to stay put where they're hiding so that she could go back in and check on everything.
I told them, I'm like, look, you guys both stay here. Don't move. I said, I'm going to go in there and just make sure, everything's okay.
Rebecca goes inside and asks Austin and Travis what's going on. Austin said that he could see Laurie sitting on the floor with her legs crossed, her head almost in her lap, rocking back and forth, crying. Austin said he could see that she had something in her hand.
I said, well, are you able to peek in? He goes, I'm not peeking my head in there any further. He goes, it's kind of like a clear shot if she does want to, do something.
Rebecca, Austin, and Travis walk outside. She asked Travis if he knew that Laurie had a gun, since he isn't supposed to be around guns with his felonies.
I'm looking for reasons to not call the police right now because I'm not letting those kids go back in that house. He goes, I had no idea she had that gun. I'm like, if I call, there's a good chance you go back to prison. There's a very good chance. We probably sat there for like maybe 3 to 5 minutes before she started yelling from the porch that she wants to talk to Travis. And we were begging him, like, do not go back in that house. Do not. He's like, well, I'll sit on the porch, but I'm not coming in there. So he sat on the porch and Austin was like kind of in view of him. And Austin's yelling at him like, you do not need to stay here. You need to grab your stuff and you need to get away from her because she's a psycho.
Travis sat on the steps of the porch while Rebecca kept the kids out there with her. Then Laurie began to kick everyone out.
And finally, she's like, Austin and Becca need to leave right now. I don't want them here. She goes, the kids need to come back inside and they need to leave. And so I was like, well, I can't withhold her children from her. I'm like, I don't know what to do. My head was spinning so fast that it was like I couldn't get a grip on anything.
Travis then told his brother that he and Rebecca can just go ahead and leave. It will be fine. They weren't really comfortable leaving yet, so Rebecca and Austin drove up the road and hung around for a bit just in case. They waited down the road for about an hour.
And he finally called and said, everything's good. She's calmed down. It's fine. I was like, well, I'm never coming back here again. Like that was the point where her and I's relationship was just about done. Like,
as frustrated as Rebecca was to see how unhinged Laurie was that night, she said that Laurie texted her the next day and told her that she wanted to apologize. So she asked if Rebecca would come over and talk to her. Rebecca agreed, and when she got to Laurie's house, Travis was leaving. She asked where Laurie was, and he said that she was back in the closet again.
This freaking closet, man. Like, you got to be kidding me. So I go in there and I sit with her and I'm like, you got to explain to me what happened. I said, that is just so abnormal for anybody. I'm not understanding how it escalated to that. And she's, again, just bringing up everything that had happened with her and Mike and the way that he treated her and the fact that she just has a hard time bringing people that are close to her and bringing people into her life that she cares about.
Rebecca tells Laurie that she has to get rid of that gun. Travis can't be around it, and if something happens and it looks like he's in possession of a gun, he can go back to prison. Laurie agrees and tells Rebecca that she's going to sell it.
I was like, look, I love you as a friend and as a sister, and you're my sister-in-law now, but this behavior has to stop, especially between you and him. I said, this is not the way to start a marriage. That's not normal.
That was the last time that Rebecca ever really got together with Laurie. She said that there were a few family functions like Thanksgiving and things like that where she would see her, but the friendship at that point was basically over.
Even the day I had my daughter, my first child, they had shown up to the hospital in the parking lot. She had started an argument about something and they didn't even come inside. Like she made them leave, made her and Travis leave. She didn't come to that. She didn't come to a baby shower. So she just basically did everything she could to really start driving a wedge between us and them. That's just what it became very, very rapidly.
As Laurie continued to drive a wedge between Travis and his family, her concerning behavior didn't stop. I spoke to Kendall, Travis's mom, and Rebecca about this. Laurie and Travis would get in arguments where she would kick him out of the house almost every weekend, telling him that he needed to leave his house key and his debit card there. She made Travis quit his job that he loved at the church because she didn't like that some of the teens that he was working with were female. Seeing how toxic Laurie's behavior was, Rebecca said that she began to think about some of the other incidents that Laurie had told her about Mike, and she started questioning whether or not any of that really happened. Laurie had told Rebecca that Mike was still around, that he knew she was living there and would come and mess with things outside. Knowing Laurie as closely as she did, Rebecca is now able to look back with some clarity on everything.
I mean, it was definitely very telling and very weird. I think in hindsight, what I think I realized about that night was I think her guilty conscience was really starting to get to her. I think she realized now that she's got this new husband and the cat's going to be out of the bag pretty soon. Like this little facade that she was putting up, I think she was realizing it's going to end sometime. And I think she was trying to preserve whatever moment of that she could. But I also think that she was just, she feeds off of drama. She feeds off of chaos, and she needs to feel needed and desired by somebody. And I think by causing tension and causing drama and the whole woe is me and the crying and the sobbing and, oh, he did this to me, that I never met Mike. I don't know the relationship, but I'm going to go out on a limb, which I think is strong, to say that he didn't do anything to that woman, not ever, especially not the stuff that she ever told me. I don't believe it for a second. But I think by her creating that, it was a way to get people to need her and kind of feel that sympathy. And that's what she needs. That she has to feel validated by having chaos in her life.
Rebecca also told me that her husband Austin's relationship changed with his twin brother Travis, despite Travis saying on the stand that it didn't change until after the investigation started. Austin confirmed this during his testimony. Laurie has even gone so far as to block Travis's family members' numbers on his phone and use his phone to text them, telling them to leave him alone. Sounds familiar.
I know the language that my brother and I use when we're speaking to each other. We say things like bro and dude. I have received texts where that language was completely changed. It was more of a direct language than anything. He told me it was not him, and she blocked me on his phone.
Robert Proper, who Travis was working for at the time the police found Mike's body, testified about Travis making this statement to him.
We were discussing Mr. Shaver's disappearance, and he made the statement basically that it wasn't a matter of he was missing, he was no longer walking the earth.
Travis said on the stand that he meant that with the police involved, it seems more serious than a wellness check, and he thinks that Mike may be dead. Travis's twin brother Austin was present at the time that Travis was telling detectives about this conversation he had had, and he remembered it the same way that Mr. Proper did.
So the conversation from the detectives was a conversation that my brother had with another gentleman, and they asked him details of Michael's whereabouts, if he's known anything about their whereabouts. And his reply was something along the lines of he's no longer walking the earth.
Wilma Nicholas, who Laurie refers to as a nosy neighbor, described Mike's interactions with his children as loving, patient, and calm. After Mike disappeared in November, she said that she noticed the fire pit being made next door around the early part of the year. Around that same time, she said that there was a smell of decomposition in the air. She said that the smell of death is very distinctive and you don't forget it. One of the witnesses that the jury seemed to have the most visible reaction to was Vanessa Townsend. Vanessa is the wife of Jeremy Townsend, or Jay. She cried on the stand as she had to relive some of the hardest moments of her marriage for the world, telling everyone about the flower delivery that she believed at the time was from Mike Shaver to inform her about her husband's affair with Laurie. When her husband, Jeremy, or Jay Townsend, took the stand on day 4, there was also something interesting that happened then. Laurie began to show emotion for the first time during the entire trial when Jeremy said this on the stand.
They're supposed to be friends with benefits, no strings attached.
Friends with benefits. Okay?
Jeremy and his wife Vanessa both testified that he never spent the night over at Laurie's because he was married, which is something that Laurie has said did happen. Texts were introduced to support his claim that Laurie wanted more from the relationship than he was willing to give, since she wanted him to leave his wife for her, and he wouldn't. Jeremy said that he was never involved in any type of altercation with Michael Shaver, and definitely didn't shoot him. He said that he didn't start coming over there until December, after Mike had disappeared. The defense has been trying to pin this on Jeremy since the beginning of this, so when he was on the stand during cross-examination, Wiggs tried to find inconsistencies with anything he could so that it would point guilt toward Jeremy. Now, it has been widely accepted and believed by the prosecution that Mike was killed in November, since that's when he was last seen alive, and that's when all of his digital communication and bank transactions stopped, other than the Claremont ATM withdrawals of cash that they believe Laurie got out, and a few texts for people to leave him alone and not contact him anymore. In a previous deposition, Jeremy had said that he wasn't around during the time that Michael was killed. While on the stand, Wiggs tries to say that Jeremy doesn't know when he was killed, but yet he said that he wasn't around when it happened. Now, the implication here is that Jeremy does know, and Wiggs is trying to create reasonable doubt for Laurie. When the prosecutor objects to the questioning, Wiggs kind of gets angry and tells him no, that he can rehabilitate his own witness when he's done.
When was Michael shot?
I don't know that.
Okay. Did you ever make a statement indicating to the contrary? I'm going to show you your deposition again, sir.
I know what I told you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Page 16. I want you to read line 3 through 7 to yourself.
Yeah.
Finished?
Huh?
Okay. Your position was, I have no evidence that I was nowhere near during the time frame or whatever happened to Michael. So now you're saying, I don't know when he was shot, but I know I wasn't around there during that time frame. Correct? So you're saying, I don't know when this man shot, but you can't pin it on me.
But if you read farther, I said that...
Is that what you just said?
Your Honor, objection. I'm trying to answer the question.
No, you can rehabilitate your own witness.
All right, and Mr. Wiggs is correct. So please answer the question directly, and so once the question's asked, answer it directly, and then move on. Thank you.
Right? So you don't know when he was killed, but you're saying you can't pin it on me. I was nowhere around without knowledge when he was killed. Correct, sir? That's what you stated in your deposition.
No, it's not.
I just read it to you. You just read it yourself.
But like I said, if you read farther...
Sir, that's what you said, right?
Your Honor, can we approach with the transcript?
Sidebar, please.
On redirect, the prosecutor points out that the same deposition that Wiggs just brought up has Jeremy saying multiple times that he doesn't know when Michael Shaver was shot. I asked Mike's sister, Stacy, if she believed that Jeremy had anything to do with her brother's death.
No, I do not. And the reason I think that is from his wife's testimony. I think his wife had a very compelling testimony. And I believed every word that she said. So to me, when Laurie and Isabelle would say things like Jeremy would stay over 3 or 4 nights a week, well, I think Vanessa would have mentioned that stuff. So to me, I don't believe he had anything to do with it because of Vanessa's testimony. I think she was the one I felt the worst for during the trial is her. She had to live it once, and now, all these years later, she had to relive it again in front of Lord knows how many people. But yes, I think she had a very compelling testimony.
The digital evidence was also laid out for the jury through various witnesses. For a complete breakdown of those, you can check out the previous episode on Laurie Shaver. The detectives involved also walked through the rest of the evidence, laying out the case and the information in the probable cause affidavit. One of Laurie's other affairs, Jimmy Ballou, also took the stand while his wife sat in the gallery and watched. That would be the wife that filed for a restraining order against Laurie that I mentioned in the last episode. Jimmy said that Laurie wanted more than he did, and he told the jury about the incident where Laurie was saying that she was trying to kill herself, so Mike actually called him to see if he could help. But he wanted no part of Laurie's drama, so he declined. The state rested on the 4th day, and it was now the defense's turn to present their case to the jury. Laurie's daughter Isabelle had just turned 7 years old when her father, Michael Shaver, disappeared. When the news broke that Laurie and her attorney wanted to have Isabelle testify that she's the one who shot and killed Mike, it was pretty shocking. I can't imagine what it would be like for a child to testify at a trial, much less a trial for your mother who they say murdered your father. Before Isabelle was able to testify, her attorney ad litem, Kelly Johnson, was put on the stand. Kelly became the attorney ad litem for Isabelle in March of 2022, and she met with Isabelle to discuss the relevant facts of the case, assisting her and guiding her with advice with regard to what her position was. While on the stand, Wiggs asked if Kelly believed that Isabelle was being honest and straightforward with her. Kelly responded that she believed that the child was able to understand the conversations that they had, but saying whether or not she was being honest is outside of her scope. The prosecutors had spoken to Kelly before and told her that anytime Isabelle wanted to come to speak to them, bring her in and they would talk to her. Isabelle would have no rights if she came in to talk without a subpoena, so it would be unethical for them to approach Isabelle directly, which limited them to speaking to her until she was subpoenaed and brought in with her attorney. Once this is all addressed through a line of questioning by counsel, Isabelle Shaver takes the stand. She told some stories about alleged abuse, and the things that she mentioned were extremely detailed, closely matching up to her mother's stories. The detailed accounts of things that happened were limited to those situations, though. When asked to recall other things, she gave the typical types of answers that we would expect from a 15-year-old child answering questions about things that happened when she was 6 and 7 years old. Wiggs asks Isabelle if it's her desire to testify and mentions the thoughts that she is being thrown under the bus. Isabelle is asked about her relationship with her father, and look, throughout my coverage of this trial, I've spent a lot of time looking into this case, speaking with family and friends of Mike, Travis, and Laurie. One of the things that was really touching to me is the amount of photographs that I've seen of Mike with his children, taking them to events like fairs or petting zoos, holding Isabelle and smiling like a proud father, laying on the bedroom floor with beach towels spread out and sunglasses on, pretending with the kids that they're having a relaxing day at the beach. Seeing the text from Mike about how he cares so much about his children and wants to protect them, and hearing from his friends and family how much he loved them. Everything that I've seen that pointed to Mike being a loving father and a good man, all of that brought on an overwhelming sadness to me during Isabelle's testimony.
We didn't really have much of a relationship. He wasn't very present. He worked at night, and so he slept all day during the day, and anytime he was home, we weren't really allowed outside of our rooms. We didn't have a relationship, really. He really wasn't a father to me. It was very combative. It was very tense. There was a lot of tension constantly. It's not calm. It was the complete opposite of calm. Whenever he was home, it was just, it was scary. It was like, we were just stuck in our rooms all day, and then, like, whenever we weren't, it was just, he was very aggressive, and we didn't have that type of relationship. No, it wasn't a calm household.
She says that she witnessed frequent and physical altercations between her parents, getting into really bad arguments on the daily, and escalating to physical situations a few times a month. Wiggs leads the child through a line of questioning where he's asking her if she felt the need to protect her mother, setting the stage for their defense, where they will have this child tell the jury in great detail about how she shot her father at 7 years old to protect her mother from an alleged incident that she says she remembers so vividly. The cameras that broadcasted the trial did not record Isabelle's face. The camera stayed on the back of Laurie's head for the duration of Isabelle's testimony, since she is a minor child. I will tell you that watching her on the stand in person really made it clear how young she is. It also made it clear that she is not emotionally connected to some of these stories that she's telling. When Wiggs asks Isabelle to tell the jury what happened, Isabelle turns toward the jury, seemingly crying and distraught, and begins to tell the story. But the moment that Wiggs interrupts and tells her to relax and go slow, she immediately turns off the emotion and begins speaking again like a regular 15-year-old kid.
Could you tell the jury?
So, it was a school day, and I'm sorry. And
First, let's relax, go slow, make sure the jury understands the events, okay?
Okay. It was a school morning.
We're going to get into what Isabelle said happened in just a little bit, but first, there are a few other things that I want to point out from her testimony. Isabelle was asked about Jeremy, or Jay as Laurie called him. She said that Jeremy came over for Christmas Eve and her brother's birthday. She said that he would spend the night and come over all the time. She even said that he came over in the mornings before school. She told the jury multiple Jeremy stories that Laurie has also told, like about him pulling up next to them at a stoplight and telling them to roll down the windows, and about how he would show up at Publix that they shopped at and try to talk to them. These are things that a 7-year-old would likely not remember almost 9 years later. So the fact that she recounts them in detail, the same stories that her mother has told, it's concerning. Another major example of this is when Isabelle says that she recalls leaving the tractor show early. She says it's because she was sick and it was hot. Now, how would a 15-year-old so vividly remember a tractor show that she was only at for a few hours when she was 7 years old? Unless she's told what to remember on the stand. When Laurie Shaver first takes the stand in her own defense, as soon as she says and spells her name for the record, she grabs a tissue and begins to wipe her eyes. She then tells the jury about meeting Michael Shaver. When she talks, she alternates between looking at the jurors and looking up and to the left as she recalls their childhood together. Laurie tells the jury that she and Mike went to kindergarten together and started dating in 10th grade. I talked to Michael's sister, Stacy, who recalled Laurie and Michael as children.
I mean, really, I met her when her and Michael were in kindergarten. We actually have a picture somewhere of the class picture of them in kindergarten. They were actually sitting next to each other. They started going out in 7th grade, and there were, like, Michael would go to his friend's house, you know, just to hang out, do whatever, and Laurie would constantly be calling the friend's house to make sure Michael was there, to see when he was going to be home, because they actually lived right next door to each other also. So she wanted to know when he'd be home, you know, things like that. So that was a couple kind of, okay, is she controlling him or just being a normal teenager? You know, as a normal teenager, some people just want, okay, I want my boyfriend here all the time. The more people look at it, because it continued over the years and would get a little worse, that kind of raised a red flag.
Laurie continues telling the jury about the earlier days of her and Mike's relationship. She says that she was very socially awkward and wasn't popular in school. She described herself as an outcast and said that she met Mike and he was an awkward kid as well. Neither of them really had anyone else, so they clung to each other. Stacy, along with most people I've spoken to, remember this differently. From everything I've seen and heard, Michael had some great friends and close friendships throughout his whole life. They do all agree, however, that Laurie always had a hard time making friends.
One thing that Michael did have some great friends that he worked with at Disney, friends that he worked with, even when he flew for Piedmont Airline and when he worked on the Precious Metal airplane. He did have some great friendships, and I'm thankful for that. But I don't think Laurie made friends very easily, even in high school or grade school. I have a lot of Michael's friends on my Facebook, and they have been talking about it. And they're like, you know, when she was in school, she didn't have any friends. So I think she kind of grew up without many friends, and I think that went into her adult life.
Throughout her testimony, Laurie took multiple jabs at Michael, putting him down for different things, but doing it in a way that was casual in conversation, possibly thinking that it wouldn't come across as manipulative or conniving if she did it that way. It didn't work. One example of this is when Laurie tells the jury that she went to college, but Mike was a dropout and didn't have any money.
He got his GED. He wanted to become a pilot. Didn't have much funding for that. My parents paid for it. I went to school for business administration and focus in health service administration.
Michael's sister Stacy said Laurie is wrong in what she said about Michael. And despite Laurie's attempts to belittle him, he was incredibly smart and talented.
Well, one thing that she said that was absolutely not true is he was a high school dropout. But he graduated from BOCES with auto mechanics. He went on to become a private pilot, a commercial pilot, a monorail technician, and worked on a world-renowned racing airplane. So he wasn't stupid or dumb or anything that she was implying by any means. He was very smart. He would actually, when he was little, We lived in this really small town, but Michael would go around and just knock on all the neighborhood doors and ask them, do you have anything I can fix for you? And people would give toasters and toaster ovens and bicycles and all kinds of little things. And Michael would take them back to our house and he would actually fix them, then take them back to the people in the neighborhood. And that was something he was very proud of. And as he got older, he could work on cars. And one of his favorite shows that he used to like to watch was Jeopardy. He was very good at it. Yeah, he could answer those questions just like that. And I remember my mom and I would kind of look at each other like, glad he knew that answer. I sure didn't. Yes. he was very smart, contrary to what was said. He wasn't particularly fond of the classroom, but you put a project in front of him and he is the smartest person in the world working on that project.
Laurie acknowledges that Mike was able to get his private and professional pilot's license, and even acknowledges that he was doing well. But in true Laurie fashion, she's unable to acknowledge it without trying to take credit for his achievements while also minimizing them. She says that he got his GED because of dating her, says that it was her family that helped him, not his own. And even when she mentions his success, she says that they were able to move to Florida when he finally succeeded in everything. Laurie said that when she was pregnant with Isabelle, she and Mike moved from New York to Fort Pierce, Florida. They were there for about a year, but ended up moving back to New York after a hurricane damaged the apartment they were living in. They were in New York for about a year when Laurie said that they moved back to Florida, right outside of Orlando. She says that she was able to move her work to Florida, and Mike was commuting with the airline from Orlando to New York City on a weekly basis, so he was gone a lot of the time. Laurie didn't mention anything about the affair that she had with her boss or about that being the reason that they originally moved to Florida, but Mike brought it up in a text to Laurie's sister, and it was apparently common knowledge. Laurie tells the jury that during this time in their lives, she and Mike just had each other. They were in a new place with no family and she had no friends. And although she and Mike just had each other, she refers to herself, to the jury, as a single mom because he traveled. Laurie also tells the jury that Mike wasn't close to his family at all and said that they never visited them in Florida and didn't even come to their wedding.
But when we were growing up through high school, we would go to Stacy's all the time. Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays.
Here's Stacy's reaction to that.
Like I said, all the things that she said were lies. I mean, like saying that none of Michael's family came to his wedding. I was in their wedding. I was a bridesmaid.
At this point, Laurie does something that kind of shocked me, to the point where I had to focus on fixing my face while I was in court. Laurie looks up, making eye contact with Michael's sister Stacy, and she begins to address Stacy directly.
I knew Desiree. I knew Danny. And you know that. But every time we would go over there and meet, you and Mike used to always get together and talk about how your dad evaded the whole family.
This was a very tense moment in the courtroom. I went back and forth from looking at the jurors' reactions to looking at Laurie to looking at Stacy, even to looking at the attorneys, expecting someone to object or stop what was happening. I asked Stacy after the trial about this moment, and this is what she had to say.
I was angry. I was angry because what she was saying was lies. We didn't get together all the time. We didn't talk about how my father abandoned us or whatever word she used. But I was very angry because she was telling lies. And I actually asked to be put back on the stand to answer to these lies that she was saying. But they told me, we're winning. We don't really need you to go back up there. It's kind of a moot point. And they knew I was angry. I don't think she had a right, and many people have noticed that she did address me more than once. And I've had multiple people who I don't even know say that that was so wrong, and I think it was too. So I was angry. I don't think I was too shocked that they let the Wiggs even let it go by. He was trying to get as much sympathy for Laurie as he could possibly muster. And I think by her speaking directly to me, I think he was trying to form that human connection between her and I.
I also asked Stacy about Laurie saying that Mike wasn't close to his family at all. Stacy explained that Laurie isolated Michael from them, making it extremely hard to keep in regular contact with him.
She did very much so. I mean, Michael and I would talk on the phone often. And it would always be done when she wasn't around. Because if she was around and he would talk to me, after like 5 minutes, she's yelling, "You need to get off the phone. You need to get off the phone." And I know there were a couple times that I had planned trips down there to see them. And last minute, they would get canceled because all of a sudden something with Laurie would come up. And so I couldn't go down there. Yeah. She made it so that him and Michael and my mom were extremely close. And she made it so that he barely talked to my mom. So she very much isolated him from his family.
Laurie said she and Mike had a lot of issues in their marriage. She describes a time when Isabelle was a little over a year old. She said that Mike had been gone for more than a week when she packed up Isabelle and flew to New York where her family was, thinking that she could get away, get support, and file for divorce. She says that she rented a house, her sister got her a job, she was seeking an attorney and joined a gym. She said while at spin class one day, she came home that night and Michael was there. There was an objection by the prosecution because Laurie is limited on what she's allowed to tell the jury about allegations that she's now making against Mike. And she isn't happy about this. She wants to be able to say everything she wants to say, to tell them her version of events and what she believes. So she tries to slip these allegations in when she can. Laurie's attorney, Jeffrey Wiggs, shifts the focus to the tension in their relationship. He grabs a folder of photos and he takes the folder up to the stand. Laurie says that she doesn't want to see the pictures. She looks up and around, grabs a tissue, and begins wiping her eyes again. It's interesting that Laurie's allegations against Mike include how physically violent she says that he was, but all of the testimony about Mike and his demeanor contradict that, even the witnesses who saw them during some of these fights. Laurie tells Wiggs that Mike was violent and says that he didn't try to hide it. But if that's the case, why are there no witnesses that testified to seeing this? There are multiple witnesses that can testify to Laurie being the aggressor, but none that can say the same about Mike. When Wiggs begins to question Laurie about Isabelle, he asks a leading question that Laurie then answers. I believe this leading question sums up the entirety of Isabelle's testimony.
Did Isabelle ever develop a feeling or a need to protect you?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Did she demonstrate?
Isabelle's need to protect her mother, in my opinion, perfectly sums up everything about her testimony. I think that the story that she gets up and tells the jury is told in hopes of protecting her mother from prosecution. Laurie attempts to tell the jury that she's the type of person that if you come at her, she won't come back at you. She will shut down. Hundreds of pages of police reports and depositions of dozens of witnesses state otherwise, but that's the story that she's going with. She seems to want the jury to believe that she is a victim who shuts down and retreats from abuse, as opposed to them knowing that she is, in fact, the abuser. She claims that there were times when she wasn't free to leave the house, and that Michael would control her eating, claiming that she reached for an Oreo one time and was thrown off the couch. She says that she tried to leave Mike 8 times but wasn't able to. They entered documents of protection order that resulted in fights between her and Mike, and I went over the details of these in the last episode. But these were only allowed to be admitted as evidence if the documents showing that Laurie then dropped these injunctions days later were also admitted. So, during cross-examination, the prosecutor steps through this door that has now been opened.
In that incident, he also suffered injuries, correct?
Yes.
Because you hit him over the head with a gun, correct?
Well, he had the gun pointed at my head, and at that point, I was done. I thought I was giving up at that point. I had nothing left in me until I seen my kids come out and start screaming. And as soon as I seen them, I took and slammed that gun into his head.
Okay. Have you ever told anyone that he was not at fault for that incident and it was actually you?
No.
No. Did you throw a vase of flowers into the sliding glass door and break that?
I did.
And you also broke objects in the bathroom, correct?
No, I did not.
Okay. There's pictures of the sliding glass door from that incident. You've seen those, correct?
Yes.
And other items in the house that were broken, correct?
Correct.
Along with the injuries to you and the injuries to Mr. Shaver.
The only injury that I was aware of was to his head.
Okay. And his pants were torn, correct?
He would hold my keys in his pants and would not let me leave the residence. So after I hit him in the head, pushed the gun into his head, I had to reach into his pocket and grab my truck keys so that I could evade the property with my children and get to safety.
We had heard before that the reason that Mike had Laurie's keys is because she was drunk and he didn't want her driving with the kids. Laurie's version is, of course, different. The prosecutor then tries to nail down some of Laurie's timeline, pointing out all of the things that don't make sense with it. For example, Laurie says on the stand that she kicked Mike out in November, which is when he went missing. She then says that the time that he came back and Isabelle and or Jeremy shot him was the first time that he had returned to the house. The prosecutor asks if he hadn't returned to the house, how did he get that check that was sent to the house and deposited into his account? Laurie's explanation for this? She said, well, he came and got his mail. He just didn't come to the house. She doesn't recall the specifics of the Walmart orders from Mike's card that were sent to her directly. Not surprising. He points out other things that don't make sense as well, like Mike leaving his job at Disney. Laurie's explanation for that? She said that there was a sexual harassment charge against him. This is yet another false allegation. Not only did Mike's supervisor testify that there was no such thing, he also brought in Mike's work records. So what is this about a sexual harassment charge? Well, during the testimony of Kendall Davidowski, who briefly dated Mike, we found out. The prosecutor asks if Kendall has ever filed a sexual harassment claim against Mike.
And have you ever initiated any sort of sexual harassment claim against him?
No.
On cross-examination, Wiggs asks her about this as well.
You never filed a sexual harassment claim against Michael?
No, I did not.
You know anybody that did?
I had a sexual harassment claim filed against me.
You're sexually harassing people?
Supposedly, yes, according to Disney.
And on redirect, we find out what really happened.
Was anyone involved with this case involved with making that claim against you?
According to Disney, it was Laurie Shaver.
Yep, that's right. Once again, it was Laurie who did something to hurt someone else and is now making it seem like Mike is the bad guy here. This is a pattern that she has proven to be true time and time again. And that brings me to the story that Laurie and Isabelle told the jury. When I was in court, I thought their stories were very similar and incredibly linear in the way they were told. Neither of them seemed particularly believable in my own personal observations, but something seemed really off with it. When I put together this episode, I took the time to splice together their testimonies to show exactly how similar they are. The order of everything, the verbiage used, the details, it all seems to be following a very close script. They both say that Mike showed up one morning before school after Laurie had kicked him out.
So I kicked him out, I think it was November 10th.
Okay.
He hadn't been at the house for a while. He was kicked out.
What's interesting about this is that Laurie says that she kicked him out on November 10th. That's 3 days after he was last seen alive. It's also interesting that a child who was 7 at the time would tell the story of her father not being home by referring to him as kicked out. Isabelle and Laurie continue through the version of events that they want to tell. Here are their testimonies of the morning that they say Mike Shaver lost his life.
It was a school morning.
I got up, got my coffee, and then that's when I noticed he was sitting out on the back patio. So I got the kids, I don't remember if it was Pop-Tarts, breakfast bars, whatever. They had tables in their bedrooms.
We had these little plastic tables in our rooms.
I went in and got them their clothes, gave them their breakfast, turned on the TV.
I did my breakfast and I was watching TV.
So I went out there and we started talking.
And I heard arguing.
And it escalated.
And I saw my father.
I went to walk back in because this wasn't going anywhere.
And my mom went to leave the argument, leave the porch. They were out on the porch.
He grabbed my arm.
And he pulled her by the arm.
There was a chair. So he had pulled me down in his lap.
He pulled her into her lap onto one of the porch chairs.
He was holding on to me.
And he held her there.
I was just trying to convince him, okay. We'll work it out.
She was like, we can work things out.
And he told me not this time.
And he was like, no, there's no next time.
After he pushed me to the ground, he was kicking me in the stomach.
He pushed her onto the ground, and he started kicking her in the stomach.
And I was screaming at that point.
And she was screaming.
He put his foot on my face, smashing it into the patio.
He put his foot on the side of her face and pushed it into the ground.
And I could not yell anymore.
And I didn't hear her anymore. So I went to my mom's room. And I went at her end table. And I grabbed her gun. And I went back out. And I went to the door. The door was already open. And he had my mom on the ground still holding her to the ground, still kicking her. And I shot him.
She had fired a gunshot. The next thing I recall is seeing Jeremy, and hearing the gunshot at essentially the same time.
Jeremy came. It was right after it happened. I hadn't even had a chance to walk away, move, nothing yet. He came in and he took the gun from me, and then he shot him again.
I started crawling away, but Michael fell forward out of the chair.
My mom had crawled away. He fell to the ground.
So he tells me to take the kids, get them out of the house.
He told my mom to take us out of the house.
And he would take care of it.
He would take care of it.
He insinuated that if we said anything, that she would be taken away. And he said that he was not going to take the blame for this.
We're not to tell anybody. We can't tell nobody. We can't call the cops. We can't say anything. Or else he was going to do the same thing to me and my brother.
I took them to school.
So we went to school.
The story that Isabelle told was so closely scripted, almost verbatim, to the story that Laurie told. And there were so many issues with it, things that didn't make sense and made it hard to accept that as truth of what happened. The prosecution team had a tough task ahead of them with Isabelle's cross-examination because this child has been through a lot. And look, I don't fault her for her behavior on the stand. The trauma that she has experienced would be difficult for an adult, much less a child. Factor that in with the fear of losing her only living parent to go to prison, and I get it, I really do. But having said that, it is concerning that there are so many problems with the testimony here. They asked Isabelle what her father was wearing, and she said a pair of shorts, which we know from the evidence that is what he was wearing because the evidence has already been presented. But in a previous deposition earlier this year, Isabelle said that she didn't remember. But now she remembers, and it was shorts, since that's what the world knows now anyway. Prosecutor Nick Camuccio then tries to demonstrate for the jury exactly what Isabelle is saying happened. She said that Mike was kicking Laurie while sitting in a chair, and then he puts his other foot on her head. So the prosecutor grabs a chair and pulls it around from the other side of the table and sits the chair in front of the jury. He sits down in it, and he is demonstrating how incredibly awkward and illogical this motion would be. Isabelle tries to, I guess, clarify this, but all it does is point out again that the story just doesn't make sense.
Please correct me. But he was sitting in a chair and his foot was on your mother's head, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you described how he was, it's going to be difficult, kicking her with his other foot, correct?
Yeah, it started out with him kicking her in the stomach, in the back. Then she was screaming. So then he put his other foot on her head to stop her from screaming, pushing her head into the ground, basically like suffocating her, choking her. And he continued to kick, but obviously because he's using his other foot now, it wasn't as strong of a kick.
But he's, as you described it, he's sitting here with one foot not on her neck, on the side of her head, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
Kicking her in the back and kicking her in the stomach, correct?
Yes.
Camuccio walks through multiple things in Isabelle's testimony that don't make sense. Isabelle said that she shot her dad in the back of the head, and then Jeremy just happened to show up at that exact moment. Isabelle says that's because he comes over before school, and Camuccio says he comes before school so that your mom can take you to school. She says that she used a different pink and black gun, and then Jeremy grabbed another pink and black gun, the one that they had in evidence, and shot Mike again in the head again. But then they just go to school like nothing happened.
We get to school. Nothing really happened at school. I would say I was most definitely in shock. But at the same time, it was like, because those types of events happen often, I was very used to like the violence and seeing things like that. And so I was still able to like perform normally at school and just kind of, not go about my day, be at school.
Camuccio points out that there has never been any trip to the hospital, or there's never been any serious injuries or anything that needed medical attention before this day. But suddenly it was totally fine for her to shoot and kill her father and then just go to school. No big deal. He also points out that her story changed because now she says that Jeremy was at the house when she got home from school, but before she said that she never saw Jeremy again. He points out that in various previous statements to police and child advocacy centers, she said that she didn't remember the specific last time that she saw her dad. He points out that Isabelle called Wiggs Jeff on the stand, which shows a sign of familiarity with him. I asked Mike's sister Stacy what she thought about Isabelle's testimony.
I thought, to me, it felt like she was very coached, especially when she called Laurie's attorney, Jeff. To a lot of people that I spoke to, and to myself, they feel that right there kind of sent a message that she met with them a lot. She met with Laurie and Mr. Wiggs a lot. We felt it was very coached, and she'd been brainwashed for many years into her possibly thinking that she was telling the truth. It was the truth that she knew that was told to her. Because, her and Laurie's stories didn't really differ that much.
On Laurie's cross-examination, the inconsistencies and things that don't add up are pointed out as well. For example, Laurie's version of events is that this whole thing happened sometime in May of 2016. But that doesn't add up because Rebecca Urbanowski moved into Laurie's house the first week in May. Also, Camuccio asked Laurie what vehicle Mike was driving in May when he arrived. There was no car there. He couldn't have walked. And it's not like there's public transportation that can get him way out there. Laurie, obviously, doesn't have an answer for this. Here's the thing with the story that they told. According to Laurie and Isabelle, literally everyone else is lying except for them. Desiree is lying about Laurie not knowing who she was. Scott Amatuccio is lying about being Mike's best friend. Frank Merritt is lying about what Laurie told him when he went out to the property to check on Mike. Rita Merritt is lying about Laurie being in a bad mood. Robert Mercado was lying about Laurie waving a gun around. Austin was lying about being there when the concrete on the fire pit was poured. Disney falsified records about Mike's work history. Kendall lied about the sexual harassment complaint that she never filed. Jeremy lied about how they met and not coming over there and a million other things that she said happened. Vanessa lied about Jeremy not spending the night away from home. Brian Shaver, Doug Shaver, Wilma the neighbor, pretty much everyone else in Lake County and in Mike's life was lying, except for Laurie and Isabelle. One of the main strategies that Attorney Wiggs sticks to with almost every witness is pushing the issue about them not being able to tell for sure who sent the messages, only that they came from Mike's phone or accounts, and that they didn't witness a homicide. The defense also points directly at other people for certain things, accusing basically anyone else except for Laurie. They say that Laurie wasn't the one sending messages to Frank Merritt. It was probably the girl that Mike had dated briefly, Kendall. They say that Laurie wasn't the violent one, Mike was. They say that Laurie didn't bury Mike's body, Jeremy Townsend did. They say that Laurie didn't shoot Mike, Isabelle did. Something that stood out to me is Laurie's behavior on the stand. When she was talking about the childhood history between her and Mike, she was looking up and to the left. Since we know that the things that she was saying were true at the time, it seems like she was accessing these memories. But when she was telling the story about how Mike died, she looked up and to the right, which can be a nonverbal cue that she wasn't remembering events. She was being dishonest. The fifth and final day of trial consisted of rebuttal. There were a few witnesses that were brought in, including Isabelle's teacher, who said that there was nothing abnormal about Isabelle's behavior that would suggest that something so traumatic had happened just minutes before she arrived on any given day. The jury also heard that there was a phone call placed to Laurie during the excavation to inform her that human remains had been found on her property. The detective said that there was no reaction from Laurie. She just said, "Okay."
During this phone call, did you inform Ms. Shaver there was human skeletal remains found on the property?
I did.
Did she react in any way?
No, she just said okay.
Closing statements were given, and Laurie's fate was handed over to 6 of her peers. After about 5 hours, the jury returned a verdict.
Case number 2020 CF 2361. Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of second-degree murder. Was the defendant in actual possession of a firearm? Yes. Did the defendant discharge a firearm? Yes. Did the discharge cause great bodily harm? Yes. So say we all, dated this 13th day of September 2024. Mercy Langley, 4-person.
Laurie didn't turn around and look at any of us in the courtroom when the verdict was read, not even her family. She cried as she was escorted to the front of the courtroom and placed in handcuffs. The camera stayed on her as they took her fingerprints, and a court officer searched her hair, patted her clothing, and made her open her mouth and lift her tongue. Laurie Shaver is no longer a free woman awaiting trial. She is now a convicted murderer. After the verdict was read, the sentencing date was set, and those of us in the courtroom stood and began to exit, a sense of relief on the faces of Mike's family and friends. I saw Stacy, Mike's sister, and she hugged me, and you could feel the emotion in the room. About a week later, when I spoke to Stacy, I asked about the family and how they had been able to move forward since the conviction that they have waited so long for.
It gave us very much a sense of relief to know that this chapter was over and that we can begin a new chapter with starting to get closure and finally starting to heal. Because I don't think we really have ever had the chance to completely mourn him because we didn't know what happened to him. I mean, we knew what happened to him, but we didn't know what happened to him. And, you know, when we found out that they arrested Laurie, we kind of put a defensive wall up, you know, and so we never even really got the chance to mourn him properly. So once the verdict was read, it was, okay, we get to close this chapter And we're going to start a new chapter of being able to mourn him and making sure he's resting in peace and us starting to get some kind of closure.
I asked Stacy, if Laurie happened to listen to this, is there anything that you would want to say to her? And this was her response.
I would like to know why. Why? That's my big question that hangs over my head. I'm sure we'll never know the answer. But that's really the one question that I have for her is just why.
We were able to talk about Mike and who he was as a person and how they want him to be remembered.
He's great. I mean, very kind-hearted, very caring, kind of quiet, but just a good person with a heart of gold. And he was just as patient as could be, more than I could ever think I would be. And I know when he was in school, one of the things that he did, and I've heard this from so many people, a new kid would come to the school. And, being a new kid in school, you don't know a lot of people. Usually you sit by yourself at lunch the first few days, and it's hard to find your classes and stuff like that. Any new person that would come in that school, Michael would attach himself to. And he'd be like their buddy. Nobody ever assigned him to it. It wasn't something that the school, it wasn't a program the school had or anything. Michael just took it upon himself. For any new student that came in there, he would attach himself to them. And he would have lunch with them. He would show them to all their classes. He would show them around the school. And people, I still hear that from people, how that made such a difference in their school life being at a new school. Even though it was a small school, it made a world of difference to these students. I'm honestly glad that Laurie got convicted when she did, because I was a little scared for Travis. I know his family misses him, and I know this isn't going to bring him back, but knowing that she's finally, after all these years, paying for what she did to him gives us a sense of, being able to move on. But I know we all miss him tremendously, terribly. Not only his family, but his friends.
She also told me one of her favorite memories of him.
It's actually one of my very favorite memories. So when he learned to fly a private plane, I lived in Lawrence, New York, and about maybe a mile and a half from my house, there was a little private airport. It was called Oneonta Airport. And that's where he learned to fly these planes. So one day, me and my kids were in my house, and we were hearing these noises. And we went out on our back porch, and there's this airplane. And it's like kind of like dive bombing our house and doing all these tricks, like turning it in the air and stuff. And I'm like, because I didn't know that he had started these flight lessons up there. And I'm like, that's really weird. And I got a phone call later, and it was Michael. And he said, do you have an airplane doing tricks over your house today? And I'm like, yeah. He said, oh, that was just me. So every time he would go up there to practice his flying, he would make sure he came and did tricks over my house, because my kids absolutely loved watching him. My children and myself were so proud of him. I mean, my children would brag about him.
Laurie Shaver will be sentenced in the Lake County Courthouse on November 25th. Mike's family planned a memorial for him, and they have begun the process of trying to move forward with this new chapter in their lives. Everyone who I talked to, Mike's friends and family, have been as kind and open as they all say that Mike was as well. With Laurie now behind bars, there's finally justice for Mike Shaver. If you're enjoying this, please leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and share this episode with a friend. For more information, photos, and episode guides, visit 13thjurorpodcast.com.